South Wales Mining Villages, 1870 to 1914, by Dr. Francis Hurd. Coal had been mined in Britain for centuries, exploited in seams which were near the surface. This was because as the mines got deeper, they would always flood. As coal replaced wood as the main domestic fuel, demand was growing. In the late 18th century, Thomas Newcomen designed the first steam engines to power pumps to remove water from mine shafts. These engines also enabled the coal to be easily transported to the surface up the deeper shafts. This is why approximately 2.54 million tonnes of British coal was mined in 1700. By contrast, by 1900, the annual amount mined was 224 million tonnes. During the 1870s, the Royal Navy decided to change from sail to steam. This meant that huge quantities of very high quality smokeless coal were required, and the best in the world comes from South Wales. There had long been coal mining in the area already, but this naval demand caused a massive expansion. This map compares how many collieries there were in the South Wales coalfield with that of Lancashire to the north. Each of the red spots represents a mine. In the mid-19th century, the Rhondda valleys were largely rural, and even when mining began to expand, as in this contemporary painting, a colliery was still surrounded by pretty countryside. Very quickly, however, the Rhondda looked more like this. Once a would-be mine owner had found a good site for a new mine, he needed to have his workforce living close by, so many new mining villages appeared. The houses were built as cheaply as possible. The collieries used the rivers along the valleys to wash coal. This was also, however, where the local families had to dispose of excrement and refuse, because these villages were built with no sanitation or rubbish collection. This meant that they were always getting bouts of cholera and dysentery. Even above ground, the air was full of coal dust which damaged lungs. South Wales miners' wives had a mortality rate in the late 19th century 50% higher than the British average for other women. The infant mortality was 69% higher. Of course, conditions were much worse for their husbands, sons and brothers. Between 1885 and 1949, coal mining accounted for at least 25% of occupation-related deaths every year, and often significantly more. South Wales was consistently the most dangerous coal mining area. It produced 19% of British coal, but accounted for at least 25% of miners' deaths every year during this period, and often a much higher percentage. Humphrey Davy had invented the safety lamp as long ago as 1815, but unfortunately, even 80 years later, most mine owners would not provide them. The commonest cause of disasters in mines was explosions caused by a buildup of methane gas. The gas would then be ignited by a spark or naked flame. The safety lamp gave light without allowing heat to escape. But because they weren't provided and they were quite expensive for miners to buy, they had to use candles. This was obviously terribly dangerous. An explosion could decimate a community because all the men would be working in the same mine. So this is a newspaper account of one such incident. In a family of 6, only one has been brought back alive, and he will be a cripple for life. The poverty of the occupants was so great that they were destitute of the means of laying out the bodies. Of all the souls who were down in the pit, it is feared only 2 can survive. A father and 3 sons lay stretched in death, and the 4th lay dead a few doors away. Miners also suffered from pneumoconiosis, where their lungs became clogged by inhaling the coal dust. This is actually an X-ray of a miner's lungs, and the black is, yes, coal dust. Water-based sprays along the underground tunnels massively reduced cases of pneumoconiosis, but it was not until after years of pressure from unions that these sprays were installed routinely in the 1940s. Like safety lamps, because there was no direct profit for them, mine owners felt they were an unnecessary expense. In the meantime, all miners carried a little brass tin like this, containing chewing tobacco to stop the dust entering their mouths. Of course, by chewing the tobacco, they laid themselves open to get oral and throat cancers. Apart from deaths, South Wales miners suffered an average of over 25,000 injuries annually. 1 in every 6 was serious enough to prevent them working down the mine again. Children in mining villages were often listed as scholar in 19th century censuses, although in fact they were working down the mine, perhaps beginning as a door boy as young as 8, working from 4 in the morning till 6 in the evening and sleeping at the mine. Their job would be to open and shut the doors which controlled ventilation underground. They might be promoted when they were 12 or 14 to become a draw boy, pulling a cart in tunnels too low for a pit pony. A cart like this could weigh half a ton, a huge weight, even with a friend pushing behind. They would probably do this until they were 16 and then became a miner. Although the Mines Act of 1842 was supposed to have stopped children under 12 working in mines, in fact it wasn't very effective. Parents were fined, not owners. And so there was thus every reason for owners to have this go on using this cheap labour, and there were very few inspections carried out of mines. 9-year-olds were working sorting rocks out of coal trucks in 1911, and 14-year-olds were still down mines in the 1940s. It was well understood what changes need to be made. This inquest report states that the jury stated that we are of opinion that the inspection of collieries, as hitherto practised, has entirely failed as a preventative to accidents of this kind, and we recommend that all collieries should be henceforth inspected by a competent person at least once in every 3 months. We further recommend that all collieries should be provided with scientific instruments for measuring the quantity and quality of the air passing through the colliery, and that a daily record should be kept of the same. It's not exactly rocket science, isn't it? But the owners just didn't want to make these changes. It's also notable that it was always miners who were called to give evidence, not the mine management, and inquest reports nearly always blamed the miners themselves for the deaths and injuries that had happened, perhaps from an explosion. It's not surprising that mining communities looked for ways to protect themselves. They clubbed together to appoint colliery doctors, like the 2 you can see standing at the left in this photograph, and to build community hospitals. Colliery doctors were well paid, but it's quite clear from correspondence in the Lancet magazine that they deeply resented that their employers were their social inferiors. Miners also paid to build their own simple chapters. Non-conformist denominations flourished. Parish churches belonged to the rich. These chapels encouraged communal activities like choirs and children's schooling. In 1898, the South Wales Miners' Federation was formed, a trade union which would fight for better working conditions for its members against the bitter opposition of the mine owners. However, after the First World War, the demand for coal generally, and for South Welsh coal in particular, began to drop off because the Navy had converted from coal to oil power, and cheaper overseas coal became available. Nearly 300 mines had closed by 1935, and this process continued for many years. Soon, many South Wales mining villages became ghost settlements, with whole streets demolished. It was the end of a short but important era.